A roofer goes to Fortified Wise, registers, and then selects one of the roofing contractor trainings that we have. Once you've taken the course, then you are eligible to take the exam. The roofers that we're looking for to become Fortified certified are ones that are deeply committed to being professional roofers and not folks that are looking to capitalize on short surges in demand caused by natural disasters. One of the reasons why we invented and came up with this test is because we needed to find a way that was going to represent how products actually perform in the field. When I moved from Northern Virginia to Florida, I had to pursue getting a general contractor's license. It really gave me an understanding of how costly certifications can be.
Everyone can do that by hiring a bunch of sales reps and just knocking doors and getting one roof per salesman. But if you are really on to building a great company, this is a great platform to be part of. Welcome to the 6th episode of season 2 of the Roofing Millionaires podcast, the only roofing podcast where we don't promote anyone and we don't sell you anything. In this episode, we are sitting down with Fred Malik, who is the managing director of Fortified. So do share this video with fellow roofing contractors so they can learn about Fortified as well, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want us to bring more roofing experts like this on the show. Let's dive in. If you can explain to me in the simplest term or the simplest possible words what is Fortified, then I think that would be a great starting point for most roofers.
In its simplest terms, Fortified is a designation program that is focused on resilience. And as far as the roof goes, it's focused on making sure that the roof can keep water and wind from entering into the house and causing a lot of extra damage. So in its simplest terms, that's what it comes down to.
What do you feel as now, what contractors think about Fortified and what Fortified actually is? Is there a difference between both the definitions?
It is a program of the company that I work for called IBHS. In IBHS, we have two primary things that we do. We do a lot of research, and then we find ways to activate that research so that we can have a real world impact. So all the science and research that we've been doing for decades, and we have spent a majority of our time focusing on roofs in particular, the majority of the research that we've done over those decades has found its way into the Fortified standard. And so it is cutting edge, particularly when we talk about things like hail, for example, and hail-resistant shingles, impact-resistant shingles. We are on the forefront of understanding how to execute roofs better as a result of that science. Now, when it comes to the execution of a designation program, there are a few things that are important for a designation program to have meaning and to create value for the roofing contractor and for their customer, and ultimately for organizations like insurance companies. And that's, you have to have a solid set of requirements, and you have to have verification. Verification brings the science to life. It's when the roofing contractors follow the standard, and we can get things like pictures and material documentation from the contractor through a third party, which is a group called our third party evaluators. All of that information can be collected and confirmed that it meets the requirements. And then an independent review body like IBHS, we look at all of that information that gets submitted from the evaluator, and we issue a certificate that now can be used by the homeowner to be able to go and access things like insurance discounts. There are some states, there are tax credits or tax incentives for fortified roofs if you invest in a fortified roof, access to grant monies. Those kinds of real world tangible benefits are available to roofers and their customers who participate. And at the end of the day, the biggest benefit, as far as I'm concerned, is the performance of that roof. Is it going to do its job on a real bad day? And there's a lot of proof points that say fortified roofs do that.
Let's just say I am a roofing contractor, I am a roofer, and I want to be part of Fortified, and I want to pursue Fortified roof. What is the step one that I have to take in order to be part of this?
So the first step that you want to do is you want to go to our website at fortifiedhome.org. And one of the drop-down menus is Become a Fortified Provider. You click on that link, you're going to see all the steps to becoming certified. And I'm glad that you brought this up, because just on November 1st of this year, we upped the game a little bit. And in order for any roof, and really for any home, to qualify for Fortified, the roof has to be installed by a certified, fortified contractor. So the first step in certification is going to that website. There we have a roofer something called our roofing contractor handbook, which lays out all of the requirements, prerequisites, things like being in business for 2 years, being associated with a roofing products manufacturer. Can be shingle manufacturer, can be a metal manufacturer, tile, but an association with a manufacturer so that there's a demonstrated track record as a professional roofer that has important relationships. We also have minimum insurance requirements and licensing requirements, and all that is spelled out in detail in that handbook. Once you have read through that and you understand what the prerequisites are, then
Mhm.
it's a requirement to register for training. So we have a training that is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on our LMS called FortifiedWise.com. A roofer goes to Fortified Wise,
Mhm.
registers, and then selects one of the roofing contractor trainings that we have. And the training takes about 3 hours to complete. It's self-paced. Roofers can do it at a time that's convenient for them. It's got about 14, 15 modules. They generally range in length from 5 to 15 minutes apiece. Once you've taken the course, then you are eligible to take the exam. You have to score an
Mhm.
85% or better on that exam, and that's usually going to be the final piece of certification. One other thing I should mention is we do work with a third-party credentialing firm called Profile Gorilla, and
Mhm.
once you start the certification process, you'll be introduced to Profile Gorilla, and they'll help you accumulate all of the paperwork that you need to complete the certification process.
When you were talking about trainings, you mentioned that you would go there and you would select the type of training. So are there different kind of trainings for different kind of certifications, or like what's like that?
One of the other improvements that we've made just recently, and we just put this into effect on November 1, 2025, is we have really consolidated all of the roofer training into one course. We used to have Fortified Hurricane and Fortified High Wind as separate courses that roofers could take. Now we have combined them. So you just take one fortified roofing course and one exam, and you get the certification for all of the different hazards that we have, high wind and hail, all included in one course.
So let's just say, and I'm assuming all of this is online as well. You have collaborated with these third party certifications and the Profile Gorilla platform. All of it is to make your profile and to make sure that you have the right documents. Let's just say someone is listening to this conversation, and before they go to the website and sign up, is there something that you can tell them on this platform, that what kind of documentation or what kind of certification do they need as a prerequisite to apply or to be eligible to apply for that training?
Yeah, so at fortifiedhome.org, again, become a fortified provider. There's a dedicated roofing contractor handbook. You don't have to subscribe to anything. You don't have to pay for anything. You can download that handbook for free, and it walks you through step by step. It tells you what the company has to have in order to qualify to be a fortified roofing company, and then what the qualifier, each qualifier for the company. So the company needs to be qualified, and then they have to have a qualifying individual as well as part of the company. So all of that is spelled out in great detail so that there's no hidden steps or any ambiguity about what's required. It's all laid out right there.
Okay, so I didn't know that you have two kind of options there. What I'm getting here is that uh, a company can has its fortified certification, but it is possible that everyone in that company is not fortified certified, right?
That is correct. And I mean, now we encourage as many people in the company as possible to take the training, but the
Mhm.
requirement, the prerequisite for a company to be listed as an active fortified wise roofing contractor is to have at least one certified roofing professional. Now, and that's a really important thing. I do want to be clear that in order for somebody to be an eligible qualifier, they have to be on the construction side or the operations side of the business. It can't be an office administrator. It can't necessarily be a salesperson. It needs to be somebody who engages and interacts with the crews and can help to make sure that when a fortified roof is sold, that the folks that are going out to install it are actually informed about what that means. And so that person is going to be responsible for communicating those details out to employees and subcontractors that this is what we need to do in order for this roof to be eligible. Again, we allow anybody to take the training, but only people
Hmm.
who meet specific criteria will be eligible to be certified.
And what is this specific criteria that someone needs to have? Like, does it mean that you need to have some certain years of experience? And obviously, you have told me that you need to be a proper project manager or someone like that who interacts with the crew, not just a door to door sales rep. But besides that, what is the overall criteria, if you can tell it here?
Yeah, sure. So you have to have a minimum amount of time in the roofing trade. So generally speaking, that's 2 years in the roofing trade. If the state where you are working requires you as an individual to be licensed, then you'll need to provide a copy of that license as well. So those are going to be part of the individual criteria. Generally speaking, if somebody is not a solo operator, they have, they have a company and a number of different roofers that work for them. Company will carry things like liability insurance, workman's comp
Mhm.
insurance. That the insurance requirements are generally going to be provided by the company. The employee, is covered by the company's policy. So that's why both things have to work together. The company has some of the required resources, and then the individual has more of the applicable skills that we require.
How do you ensure that, let's just say I am a door to door sales rep and I have taken the training, I took the courses, I did the examination as well, and I passed that. How do you ensure that I am actually a person who is legitimate?
No, we have to rely on people having integrity and being honest. I mean, if somebody's really committed to not being forthcoming and doesn't describe their position accurately, there's potential for that. But what we do is Profile Gorilla as our third party credentialing firm. So they talk directly to the folks that are seeking to become certified. There's a personal experience proof that has to be provided. So, for example, if somebody's going to claim that they've been in the roofing trade for a couple of years, a
Hmm.
resume or professional documentation that shows that's the case, and the content that we have on the exam is pretty technical. Doesn't mean that somebody who has never installed a roof couldn't possibly figure it out with the resources that we have available on how to get an acceptable score. But remember, we're not teaching people how to be roofers. We're teaching people how to be fortified roofers. So they have to have basic understanding about the roofing trade in order to be able to be successful on applying the fortified principles and passing the exam. So we do go through a vetting process, but again, if somebody could not be forthright, it can be more challenging to get to the bottom of that.
I agree with you, and I feel as a business owner that there is no perfect system for anything. You cannot perfect everything. At the end of the day, you have to rely on someone else to actually make it work. Speaking of that, you also mentioned that you are not on the hunt to teach people how to be a roofer. You are on the way to teach roofers how to be a fortified roofer. So what is the difference between a typical roofer and a fortified roofer?
Generally speaking, for folks that are seeking to be certified are folks that are looking to do more than just the minimum that is required by the code or by the manufacturer to install roofing products, right? So there's a commitment that's involved to being exceptional at your trade and being able to understand that, hey, I need to pay attention to these specific details if I want to provide a product that's going to perform under extreme circumstances. And so a roofer who is newer to the business, or somebody who maybe has a line of business that tends to follow around storms and go from market to market following hail or following hurricanes or other kinds of severe wind events, it's really important that the roofers that we're looking for to become fortified certified are ones that are deeply committed to being professional roofers and not folks that are looking to capitalize on short surges in demand caused by natural disasters. And so that's why we have a minimum number of years in business requirement. It's why we
Hmm.
require local licensure and those kinds of things. So the other thing too is it's really folks that tend to move in and out of markets following storms. They generally don't like to get bogged down in extraneous training. They want to get in, put the roofs on and get out. Having a requirement where somebody has to actually have been through training and been certified by us helps to elevate the game, because it means you got to slow down a little bit to get those extra skills. And not every person who calls themselves a roofer is willing to do that. So we're really invested in looking for folks that are professional and committed to the trade and committed to excellence in the trade.
I agree with you on that. And I think that the questions that we are touching right now are the questions that someone would generally have if they are in roofing. And even though this is a basic level stuff, but I think if we can discuss this, that can be beneficial to people who are interested in this. And I have a question here, Fred, that let's just say I am a roofing contractor. I have years of experience, a certain years of experience, and now I'm, for some reason, I'm not working with any particular roofing company. Is there a way I can be a fortified roofer as well?
You'd have to be, so in order for somebody to be eligible for listing in our directory, they'd have to have a company that's been in business for at least 2 years, and they have to have a qualifying roofer. So if you're not installing roofs professionally, it is not possible to get certified as a fortified roofing contractor and just carry that certification and not really be engaged in the trade of roofing. Now, that being said, let's just say somebody's gotten tired of being on the roof and they don't want to be installing roofs any longer, but they still would love to be a part of a program that is involved in creating more resilient homes. We do have the evaluator track. So if somebody is an experienced contractor but no longer installing roofs, they have the option to become one of our third-party certified evaluators and go through that track to become part of the verification process. Now, you can't be an evaluator that is employed by a roofing company. We have a conflict of interest policy. Having somebody who brings an evaluator in-house would have an issue. But a roofing contractor who, say, wants to retire from installing roofs but is still passionate about resilience can potentially join the pool of certified fortified evaluators.
What if like a company has the fortified certification and is part of the program, and later on, like, how do you guys ensure that they are maintaining the standards? And if they don't, is there a way that you cancel their membership or cancel their license or certification as well?
So we didn't really talk yet about the evaluation process, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. So once somebody has become certified and they start installing roofs, right, they're going to be working with a third-party evaluator, and on each project that they want to have a designation certificate issued on, the evaluator will submit the work. And when we get a file, we get a couple of critical pieces of information about the roofer involved. So we get their company name, we get the certified individual from that company. There is something called a roofing compliance form that is part of the documentation process that the roofer has to complete. We get copious amounts of pictures, and each and every roof that's installed, we have a team of auditors that reviews every single file. And so if we see a pattern emerging where a roofing contractor is not installing in compliance, right? So if something's out of compliance, we'll generally send it back and say, hey, this roof is not in compliance. Here's what's wrong. And if it's something that hopefully it's something that can be easily fixed, or it's just a piece of documentation that got missed and is available and gets submitted, we can reassess whether or not it meets the requirements or not. But if it is something truly out of compliance, then there's going to be a decision that has to be made. Either the roof has to get replaced and brought into compliance, or if there's an established pattern of behavior where a roofer is not delivering compliant roofs, then we have a formal disciplinary process. And when that happens, when that kicks in, we would begin a coaching process that says, hey, here's where you're deficient. This is what you need to deal with to get your roofs into compliance. And if you fail to do that, then yes, your certification as a contractor is in jeopardy. And we have a formal process to be able to move through the gates there. And ultimately, if somebody's a bad actor, documentation is not consistent with our requirements, roofs are not being installed with our requirements, then there is a disciplinary policy that allows us to revoke that certification.
Okay. And you also mentioned about the mistakes in installations and the patterns that someone like they are not fixing it. So are there any common installation mistakes that people make or that roofing contractors make after being part of the Fortified, and that you have to mitigate or your team has to mitigate, and you can share them here so maybe someone can learn them and fix them beforehand?
There are a couple of things that are important details that really need to be paid attention to that can result in a lot of potential expensive rework. And so I'll just cover a couple of them. So the very first requirement we have is making sure that the material selection that you're using is that they are all going to be compatible with one another. So generally speaking, when you remove the existing cover, and that's one thing, Fortified requires that only one layer of roof cover. So we don't allow embossing over or doing multiple layers of cover. You have to take it down to the original deck. And once you're in the, at the original deck, checking to make sure that the substrate is in good condition, and then it's ready to go with whatever material that you're going to put on it. So where does that come into play? Sometimes folks need to pay attention on whether we have 4x8 sheet roof sheathing, or do we have 1x material that has gaps. If you have gap decking, then that's got to be dealt with before you can install the rest of the roof. We have a standard detail that allows for installation of new sheathing over gap deck. In a lot of places, the code doesn't allow gap decking either. So this is something that we would typically have to do anyhow. But that's one thing, making sure that the substrate's in good condition, and that if necessary, that you're working over a roof deck, that the material that you're installing over it, whether it's shingles, metal, tile, is going to be compatible with. The next thing is making sure that that deck gets properly attached. And one of the bigger issues that we see, especially with folks that are using nail guns these days, I'm dating myself there. I guess I can remember when we used to install roofs and we didn't have the pneumatic nailers. It's important to make sure that the fasteners that you're putting in actually are hitting the structural members, right? And so if somebody snaps a line and it's off and they run up that line, one of the things that we do is the evaluator goes into the attic and surveys the underside of the attic and looks for shiners, missed nails that would be intended to secure the deck to the rafter or the truss. And so making sure that nails made it into the structure is really important. That is an issue that we have run into before that somebody has to go back and deal with. Probably the next most important thing is when you are selecting the sealed roof deck. So one of the components that we require as a part of a fortified roof is called sealing the roof deck. And what we mean by that, it's also known in some places as secondary water barrier. And what that is generally speaking, the most common sealed roof deck system we have is a roofer will use a qualified roofing tape on all of the horizontal and vertical seams. And this is most appropriate for a 4x8 deck, roof deck sheathing. So they install the tape. It has to be a compatible tape. So making sure that you're reading, the specifications of the tape that you've bought, that's in compliance. And then a mechanically fastened underlayment. These days, the most popular underlayments in this system are the synthetic ones. And it's really important to follow the fortified requirements for mechanical fastening of those underlayments. We have it's a simple pattern, and it's actually the pattern that the majority of manufacturers require for high wind exposure of those synthetic underlayments. But that's 6 inches on center at all of the laps, horizontal and vertical laps, and then 12 inches in the field. Now, one of the most common things that we see, and we have to use button cap nails to secure that material, by the way, but one of the most common things that we see is that people don't take into account the width of that material. And so as the material gets wider, generally speaking, it's 3, 4, 5 foot rolls. For every 1 foot of width, you need an extra row of fasteners, right? So a lot of times we see the field fastening gets too far apart. And so we're really diligent about checking that. We've actually even worked with manufacturers. GAF is a really good example. We talked to them and said, hey, your targets on your underlayments that are 4 and 5 foot in width, they're too far apart, even for your own installation requirements. They worked with us and we talked it through, and sure enough, they said, yep, we agree. And they've now placed those targets where they need to be at 12 inches on center and not 14 and a half, 15 inches on center. So making sure that mechanically fastened underlayment gets properly attached is another one that folks seem to struggle with. Now, there are two others that I'll point out.
Hmm.
One is Fortified does require that every house have edge metal, and that edge metal needs to be 26 gauge, and that needs to be nailed off at 4 inches on center. But we also require on a shingle roof that you use a starter shingle, okay, a
Hmm.
self-adhered starter shingle, or a standard starter shingle embedded in mastic. We do occasionally see roofers that forget that part. They'll use the starter shingle, but they won't embed it in mastic. And we do get that documented, and we'll have to send somebody back, and they'll have to figure out how they're going to get that starter to adhere to that edge metal so that the wind can't get underneath there and cause that edge to fail, which is where in most newer roofs, 5 years and younger, if you're going to have a failure, it's usually going to be at the edge. And so that's one thing that we also look at. And the final thing I'll say is it may not be very common for a lot of folks out there, but
Hmm.
if somebody is working with cedar shakes and shingles,
Hmm.
that is a very sensitive product to moisture. And so making sure that you're installing that in accordance with the technical guidance from the Cedar Shake and Shingle Bureau. So in other words, putting that over a breathable underlayment and not a fully adhered underlayment. We've had a number of houses that had issues where they put the Cedar Shakes over a fully adhered membrane, and that can cause some issues. And so it's those kinds of details that we're paying attention to, and those are the kinds of things that trip people up on shingle roofs in particular. I said that was the end, but I will point out one other thing that when
Hmm.
you are using metal panels, especially when you're doing metal panels outside of, say, Florida. Florida has a very specific building code requirement for design pressure rating, and there's a very comprehensive product approval process in the state of Florida. Elsewhere, not so much. Fortified does require a metal roof system it has to have been tested, and we have to have that testing that shows how that product is supposed to be secured to reach different design pressures. In a lot of jurisdictions, nobody's asking roofing contractors for that information. And so that is probably in other places outside of a few areas along the Gulf Coast and in North Carolina, we do have roofers that have to get used to the fact that somebody's going to be asking, what's the design pressure requirement for that roof, and what is the fastener placement on that roof? And they may not be used to that being done through code compliance. That was a long answer, man. I'm sorry, but I wanted to get good
I
information.
loved that. And you know what? There are a few things that I learned from your answer is that we are not here to teach roofers how to be roofers. That took me to your original point that you were trying to make. We are trying to make roofers who want to do some quality work to and we want to make them fortified roofers, and we are not here to teach that why you should nail the shingles on the original deck, why you should use the button cap nails, and why you should do what you have to do in if you are using cedar shakes or something like that. But we have to teach them that what are the things that if you are willing to do the great work, what is the right process to do that. We are not here to teach roofing. And you also mentioned about building codes, and that triggered me that a lot of the stuff that you said to me in that answer, someone can easily confuse that with building codes. And the question I have is, do you feel that roofing contractors confuse fortified with building codes?
So I don't necessarily think that they confuse it. I think that the good news is we work really hard to make sure that Fortified is consistent with the most current model codes like the IRC or the IBC. We make sure that we're current with the most current codes, most recent codes. And if anything, Fortified might be a little bit beyond that. So the requirement for the sealed roof deck, for example. So I don't think roofing contractors are confusing it with code. I do think that as you look to deliver a higher performing product, there are additional details and costs associated with that. And so that may affect pricing. And it's really important that when roofing contractors are sitting down at that kitchen table, having that sales conversation with their potential client and saying, hey, we have the opportunity to deliver a code compliant roof, and we have an opportunity to deliver something to you called a fortified roof. And let me tell you a little bit more about what a fortified roof involves and why we offer this. That's a great sales opportunity for roofing contractors because it does two things. One, it demonstrates a level of professionalism that can differentiate you from your competition, right? So you pay attention to the details. You are offering value options, not just price sensitive options, and you're letting the homeowner choose. Um, and being a leader in your community and saying, "Hey, this is something that I have the opportunity to offer to you, but not all of my competition is up to speed on these things or as current as I am." That just is a way of segmenting yourself as a quality roofer that goes beyond just what the minimum requirement is.
Okay, I agree. And like you mentioned that a roofer needs to ask about the pressure on the roof and stuff like that as well. So, what are the questions that a roofing contractor needs to ask the evaluator or the fortified team in order to be having that knowledge that he needs to help the evaluator or to do the roof in a way that matches with the fortified standard?
Yeah, so obviously the training covers a lot of details about what it takes to do a fortified roof. And if you're only going to have one person that goes through that training to be certified, then you need to have a mechanism in your company about how you're going to spread that information across your organization. And if you sub work out, you got to be able to communicate it to the subs. Now, a couple of things that we do to try to make that easier.
Hmm.
We have free resources, free to everybody,
Hmm.
resources on our fortifiedhome.org website. We have checklists for the roof, specifically for roofing contractors, that lay out these are all the things that are required by Fortified, and this is the kind of documentation that's going to be required to be collected and provided to the evaluator as part of the evaluation process. The evaluator does make site visits and will be on site to document certain things, but we want to make sure that we're not slowing down the installation. So when the evaluator is not able to be on site, the roofing contractor can help to fill in the gaps with the documentation. So we have free checklists. We have them in English and in Spanish because those happen to be the two most popular languages in the trade. And so those resources are available for English and non-English speakers. We also have a comprehensive set of standard details, so pictures that show how to install the sealed roof deck, for example. And so being able to hand that to an installer on the site and say, "Hey, I need it to look like this," is another very valuable tool and a simple way of communicating something that might be different than what they just did on a non-fortified roof.
You mentioned that you made a lot of changes to the process on the first of this month, November 1. What are the things that you feel people are or roofing contractors are still struggling with when it comes to onboarding and when it comes to understanding the process? And what did you change on November 1st? And what are the plans to be changed in the future?
So I think that number one, let me take the last question first. So we try to keep the standard very stable. We only update the standard every 3 years, and we've based those changes on one of two things, generally speaking. One are the underlying engineering behind the standard changing. So the reference materials like ASCE 7, for example, which some of your audience may be familiar with, but that's what helps to set the design wind speeds for a home and at its given location. So if that document is changing, that changes how design pressures are calculated and other requirements that affect roof installation, particularly for metal, tile, and other kinds of material other than shingles. So if one of those reference documents is changing, we'll change the standard to keep up with that.
Hmm.
The other thing that can change is if we learn something substantial through our own research. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like. So on November 1, IBHS released an updated version of our IBHS impact resistant ratings for shingle products. Now, we had a list of qualifying products before, but we have greatly expanded that. So we now, on our current list that came out in November, we now have 25, 26 products on that list. We have almost 95% of the IR market has been tested by IBHS and rated by IBHS. And in our fortified requirement for a hail designation, if you're using shingles, you have to use a shingle that is either rated good or excellent on our ratings list. Now, this is different than class 4, UL 2218 class 4 or class 3. One of the reasons why we invented and came up with this test is because we needed to find a way that was going to represent how products actually perform in the field, and are they going to be there to do their job when they need to be. And class 3 and class 4 have been around for 30 some odd years. The science and the technology for testing asphalt shingle products has changed. And we felt like it was time to bring a test standard forward that could do that and not just represent natural hail versus steel balls, which is the 2218 test, but also be able to be testing product that's coming off the shelves in distribution, just like a roofer would get it, and making sure that we are looking at damage modes that actually make sense. So dents and ridges, cuts and tears or breaches in the shingle, and then granule loss. So all of those things are part of our testing. And we changed our standard in November to reflect that new list of products. So that's one way we do that. But I do want to be clear to the roofing contractors that we take great care and we don't change things unless we really feel like they need to be, because we want it to be consistent and predictable. We don't want roofers to feel like we're moving the goalpost every 6 months. That's not our intention. So we only update the standard every 3 years. In terms of, getting familiar with the requirements and understanding, what might be different between the fortified standard and the code, the best resource we have is the training. So the actual standard itself, the checklist, the details, those are all available for free. The roofers can download that stuff anytime. But the important thing is to take advantage of your certification, right? So the other big change that we made is that roofers who had not been exposed to fortified before had a much higher failure rate on the designation process than roofers who were certified. That's why we made that change in November, is to make sure that all roofs were being installed by certified contractors. Then they had been exposed to, this is what I'm going to have to do. We expect that that's going to have a significant impact on the initial success rate, knowing what you're required to do, as opposed to a non-fortified roofer having to work with an evaluator and then learning on the fly what was going to be necessary. That was something that just had too high of a challenge rate for the roofer and ultimately for the end user. And we really want the homeowners to have a positive experience with their roofing contractor, get exactly what they're looking for, and access all those incentives that they might be able to get.
I can think of some real life scenarios here on working with the evaluators. And one thing that I can think of right now, Fred, is that there can be an issue with the supply and demand as well. Like, I think that scheduling the evaluation with an evaluator can be a reason to slow down the job if we have less supply of the evaluators and more demand.
I think it's a valid concern, especially as we're growing super rapidly. We now have fortified homes in 34 states. That we've added 4 additional states in just the last 2 years. We will do 22,000 roofs this year alone. Next year, in the first quarter, we'll pass 100,000 fortified roofs in the United States. So with that kind of rapid growth and expansion, it takes time to build up the infrastructure and the networks in these new locations. That being said, generally speaking, we are going into states where there is a tangible driver of demand. So, for example, Oklahoma is one of our newer markets. There is a fortified roofing, a roof grant program in Oklahoma. Once there's a central focal point like that, then we can get roofers to pay attention. We can get evaluators to pay attention, and people will have confidence that there's going to be a demand for their services. Easier for us to train and attract new people. Louisiana, I think you guys talked to a couple of roofers from Louisiana. Louisiana is our fastest growing market. 2.5 years ago, we had a few hundred designations. Earlier this month, we surpassed 10,000 designations in Louisiana. That's a tremendous amount of growth in that state in just 18 months to 2 years. And we have evaluators, and we have several dozen roofing contractors. Our provider network includes both evaluators and roofing contractors has doubled in the last 12 months. And then we expect that it's going to double or more in the next 12 months. So next year, we're forecasting 25,000 fortified roofs being installed, which is around a 20% increase over where we'll be this year. And that's been a consistent trend. So you're right. There are some growing pains as we open up in new markets. We do have to work on providing resources. One of the things that we are experimenting with is something called direct submit. So for roofing contractors that have been established in Fortified, who have a track record of successful installations and the like, we are experimenting and piloting a pathway where after a certain amount of successful installations, a roofer can be nominated to become a direct submit roofer, which would allow them to be able to submit documentation directly to IBHS and streamline that path. However, that being said, while we are exploring that as an option, really the best way for a roofing contractor to be successful at Fortified is to really be good at communication. I'll tell you that when I talk to evaluators, and I hear the frustrations from both sides. I hear it sometimes from the roofer, I hear it sometimes from the evaluator, but generally speaking, it can all be tied back to one primary thing, and that is communication of the schedule. I've been building houses for over 30 years now. And so I've been in the trenches scheduling trades. I understand the impacts of weather. I understand the impacts of material availability and delays in getting material on site, all that kind of good stuff. Roofing contractors have to be really good at seeing the evaluator as a collaborator on their project, and they have to make sure that they're communicating effectively when there have been changes. Nothing disrupts a job more and potentially slows it down more than waking up in the morning and going, oh no, I need an evaluator today because I'm installing a roof over here that's going to be fortified, calling the evaluator, and the evaluator say, hey, I'm booked for the day. I can't get there today. That's a real challenge. So, getting into the habit of being a proactive communicator is the key for success. And the good news is that probably a lot of your audience, those that are millionaire roofers, they're probably really good at process. And so this is just one of those things to put into the process, making sure that you're updating the evaluator on the schedule, and you'll have far fewer.
Okay, actually, that was my next question that I was going to throw at you, that what you plan to do to improve the scheduling process. And like you already told me that you are introducing or you are experimenting with this direct submission. Do you also, like speaking of communication, do you also ask the roofing contractors and take their input on how these things can be improved?
Sure. So being a part of the network does a couple of things. It does give you access to our technical team and the folks that are responsible for the program processes and all that kind of good stuff. So as a member of the network, we have a communication channel. It's called Zendesk. It's a way of submitting tickets. We use those tickets to be able to have a written record of questions that get asked, to make sure they get followed up on and that kind of good stuff. And so being able to provide feedback about where challenges are, there's an option to do that. We also have a team. We have two people here at IBHS currently. Mark, who is the director of Fortified Roof, he's out in the field a lot. He's at distribution. He's at local contractors associations. Those in-person forums are a great way for us to get feedback. Mark loves talking to roofers and loves to help them be successful. And so being able to attend an event where Mark is going to be there is a great way to be able to share that feedback. We also have another person on our team named Sean, who's a roofing technical support person that is available in our office to be able to also take feedback and to address questions that roofing contractors have. So yes, there's lots of different ways for folks to communicate opportunities that they see for improvement, as well as to share with us where there might be challenges.
What is the cost? Because I think that most people would be interested in this. What is the general cost of becoming part of or getting certification by Fortified?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that I'm really excited and really proud of. Like I said, as somebody who's been building houses for a while, when I moved from Northern Virginia, where I worked for a builder, and I was not required to be licensed, and then I moved to Florida and had to pursue getting a general contractor's license. It really gave me a an understanding of how costly certifications can be. It, it wasn't an insignificant amount of money. We've worked really hard. Fortified is not a profit center for IBHS. We are a
Hmm.
nonprofit, and so we don't generate fees to fund our operation. Our program is generally funded by our member companies. And those are companies like property insurance companies. So that's companies like State Farm and Allstate, Nationwide. We have about 80% of the residential property market and about 50 to 60% of the commercial insurer markets. Those are the folks that are members of IBHS, and they pay dues every year. And so those dues cover our costs. So we've been very fortunate to be able to keep a 3-year certification cost $150 today. $100 for the course and $50 for the exam. So it is not a barrier to entry in terms of costs for certification. Now, I will say that with this new credentialing third-party program that we brought on board, one of the things that service does is it helps to get lead information into a digestible format for the roofing contractor. And so if somebody gets a lead from us, they then get the ability to reach out to that person, qualify that lead, talk about the project, submit a bid. And then once the homeowner accepts that bid, the
Hmm.
roofing contractor then would let us know that they've accepted that project, that they've successfully won that project. And at that time, once they have accepted that project, then they are charged a $25 fee. But that's it. There are other lead generators and lead programs that people get involved in that cost them, $200 to $400. $25 is all that gets charged there, and we work really hard to keep those prices as low as they could possibly be.
And one thing that I just came to know that Fortified is a non-profit, and state farms and other organizations are working with you. So I think in the future, what can happen is that because a lot of folks in the roofing industry, they have this, they don't like state farms and other insurance organizations. So Fortified can become a platform that gives them the stability and the quality that maybe State Farm requires in order to approve the roofs or in order to make the insurance process even optimized as well.
So that's already happening. There are states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana,
Mhm.
Oklahoma, Georgia, and North Carolina all have incentives that are tied to Fortified. Oh, now insurance is a little bit of an odd business. I'm not an insurance insider. I'm a home builder by trade, but there are over 50 insurance markets in the United States, right? So, and each is independently regulated. So even if State Farm writes in 2 different states, there's different regulations and different requirements in those 2 different states. And so all of our member companies, where they are admitted carriers in the states that I just listed, there are fortified
Mhm.
incentives. Many of them are using fortified or offering fortified incentives in other states as well. That is something that is becoming more and more popular because fortified works. And let me just give you a concrete example of that. When somebody says, "I don't know, why do I really want to install fortified roofs? It seems like a lot of hassle for." And maybe it's not going to be that big of value for my customer. Well, Hurricane Sally gave us a really great opportunity to demonstrate, does fortified work in the field, not just in the lab. We're confident. We knew it worked. We could do full size testing, but Sally put 18,000 fortified homes to the test. And the University of Alabama earlier this year did a study for the Department of Insurance in Alabama looking at performance of non-fortified homes versus fortified homes. If you had a fortified home, and every fortified home has a fortified roof on it. If you had a
Mhm.
fortified home, you are 70% less likely to have to file a claim. If you had to file a claim, the claim was going to be on average was 33% lower than a non-fortified home. So you were less likely to have a claim, and if you had a claim, it was going to be it was less severe. The other thing that it gave us the opportunity to do, or not us, but the University of Alabama to do, was to compare fortified to fortified like. So in
Mhm.
Mobile and Baldwin County, codes had evolved to be very similar to what we require in fortified roof. And the University of Alabama was able to look at how fortified like non-fortified homes that were inspected by normal building inspection methods, and then the fortified designated homes that had our process on top of it. If you had a fortified home, your home performed 50% better than a non-fortified pier that was built to a similar code. So it's the documentation and verification process that pays
Mhm.
attention to those key details that delivers performance. And I'll go one step further to say, immediately after Sally, I had roofing companies calling us and saying, I have not had a single warranty claim as a result of this hurricane. That's amazing. I've installed 2,000 fortified roofs in the last year. I didn't get one phone call. It's that kind of, and then that reputation starts to follow you, and you get a lot of referral work because you installed a roof that didn't have a problem. So it's those kinds of things that really round out the value proposition for roofing contractors: reputation, lower warranty costs, increased opportunities to earn business, and association with a program with a demonstrated track record. Those are all good reasons to be associated with Fortified, get certified.
Perfect. And thank you so much for sharing that insight with us, because I think so. Now, there is no reason a good roofing company or a roofing business shouldn't be part of this program, because there are so many incentives. And I think you guys are really working hard to actually fulfill every demand of both sides, both the homeowners and the roofing companies, and maybe collaborate with the insurance to fill all the gaps as well. The other day, when we were sitting down, Fred, Cliff was in that meeting as well, and he talked about something statistics, and you brought some statistics about Hurricane Sally and the University of Alabama. He talked about some statistics like how much water gets into the roof, what is the pressure on the roofs, and stuff like that. So, for someone who is too much oriented towards the number and needs some stats to back this up and make the decision to be part of this program, what are the stats that you would like to share that we discussed the other day as well?
So I think that a couple of those things. When we talked about specifically about the sealed roof deck, and that's
Yes.
probably the thing that is the biggest change for most roofers is having to follow that. Select one of the approved systems. Now we have multiple systems that can be used in a variety of different ways to make sure that they're compatible with the roof cover that you're using and not
Mhm.
compromising air circulation and all the rest of that. But sealing the roof deck is probably the most important resilient feature that a roofer can provide to their customer. And why is that? When we do our studies, and we looked at really hard at this, we blew roofs off in our test chamber. For those of you who may not be familiar, if you haven't gone and seen them, go take a look at the videos at IBHS.
Mhm.
We have the ability to test roofs and homes at full scale. We can create category 3 winds and 8 inches of rain an hour. And so we can recreate actual hurricane wind tracks and put a house through that and watch the roof cover fail and then see how effective a sealed roof deck system is to reducing the water. When we did those studies, we found that any one of the 4 systems that we have that are included in the fortified standard reduced the potential water intrusion by over 95%. And why is that important? For
Mhm.
every 1 inch of rain that hits a bare roof deck where there are
Mhm.
exposed seams, for every 1 inch of rain that hits that deck, 9 bathtubs of water go inside that house. Think about how much damage that can do in very short amount of time, that volume of water that goes in. And I saw that firsthand in Sally. I was
Mhm.
driving neighborhoods and you'd see fortified house, non-fortified house. And in front of the non-fortified house, unfortunately, lots of wet belongings out at the street, ready to be picked up and taken to the dump. And so for something like that to be
Mhm.
so effective, I mean, it really is something that every roofer should be offering to their client. Some of the other things that we do, you talk specifically about pressures. So why do we require starter shingles and edge details like edge metal? When you study how wind attacks a roof and moves around a roof, the highest pressures that are going to act on that roof are going to be at the edges. So down at the eaves, if you have hips and ridges, it's going to be at the hip, the peak, and it's going to be on the ridge. There you're going to get the maximum amount of pressure, and that's where
Mhm.
the roof is most likely to fail. And so knowing that that's how the roof is going to interact with the wind, we want to reinforce the system at those vulnerable points. And sure enough, that's what we've done with Fortified. So from a technical perspective, we are only focusing on the things that actually reduce the damage. We're not worrying about stuff that's not going to deliver some sort of of tangible impact. We want to make sure that we're only requiring people to do just what's needed, not too much.
By incorporating Fortified in someone's company, can someone, a roofing business owner or a roofing contractor, also have higher margins, or does it make them like eligible to charge premium because they have this certification as well?
So, I mean, obviously, I'm a strong believer in that it's going to be an effective tool for you if you can offer different levels of performance. People have different budgets, and you have to make a decision as a business owner which buyer profile is your primary target. But
Mm,
at the end of the day, when I was selling houses, I wanted to ask a few questions about what was important to my potential buyer, and then move to support that with options that I could bring available. And that's what Fortified does for roofers. You sit down and you ask people, what's important to you about your roof? If somebody says the only thing I care about, I just need to get a cover on it, and I don't really care what it looks like, I just give me the lowest cost option. Okay, you don't maybe spend a lot of time talking to them about Fortified. But if somebody says, and I just was in a presentation yesterday about for a neighborhood called Babcock Ranch down in Florida, they were talking about the changing buyer preferences that they're seeing. They did a very detailed customer survey there. And one of the things that kept coming up was cost of insurance and
mm,
durability of the home, that people really are looking at making buying decisions based on durability. And so if that's where the market is moving, you need to, as a roofer, you need to be able to sit down and sell people something that they are looking for, but they might not know exactly how to achieve it, right? So you're the expert. Here's how the roofs I install can make your home more durable and far less likely to have significant damage or disruption following a storm. And that's when you can lay out what Fortified really looks like. The other thing that does is it does
mm,
give you the opportunity, if you're talking about what it takes to install a fortified roof, that often leads to using more accessories. So
mm,
things like, GAF has a fortified compliant tape. And so
mm,
assembling all of the fortified components that a manufacturer has gives
mm,
you the opportunity to sell more accessories, which can lead to higher margins. And, as you start to put those systems together, you may also have opportunities to access other kinds of benefits, like additional warranties that manufacturers might offer as you sell more of those products. So, I do think there's a lot of ways that Fortified can help somebody sell more roofs and sell them at higher margins. And the last thing that I'll say too is that, again, part of being a fortified roofing contractor is having access to fortified branding. So you can put it on
mm,
your business cards, you can put it on your sales collateral in your point of sale material. But it also gives you the opportunity to use some of those really outstanding video pieces that we put together that show how a fortified
mm.
roof performs better under extreme circumstances directly from our research center. So imagine sitting down, salesperson has their iPad or their tablet and is walking them through, the prospect through color selection and talking about Fortified and saying, well, oh, hey, if you're not familiar with what that is, let me show you this quick 30-second video. It shows a roof being ripped off and the water pouring in, saying, now, when we put the fortified roof on, here's the things that are different that prevent that from happening. A picture or a video, tells a thousand words and really can instantly crystallize and solidify that in a homeowner's mind. Say, I want that. Tell me what it takes to get that.
Is there any other way that a roofing business can incorporate fortified branding into their this process?
So a couple of other things that we do. When you become a certified contractor, you do get access to the logo and being able to use the logo. We do, on our marketing resources page, we provide things like insurance incentive sheets for states where it's applicable.
Mm,
We have brochures and one pagers that help explain what Fortified is to customers that Fortified roofers can download and use. We also have some social media posts that people can use to talk about their participation in Fortified. But the other thing that we offer too is, as a roofer gets to be more prolific in installing fortified roofs, Every year we recognize high volume winners. And so producers, once you reach the 100 roof threshold, now you become eligible for one of our annual volume awards. When you get an annual volume award, that then plays a role in how your listing is displayed in our directory. So when a homeowner comes to find you, if you're a
Uh,
Fortified Volume Award winner, your listing gets posted higher in the directory,
uh.
and gives you more exposure to more potential clients. So, and once you've become an award winner, you can also, there's a special graphic that comes along with that, and you can add that to your magnets that you have on your trucks and your brochures on your website. All of those things are fair game.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that these materials alone can be a great use if someone knows how to use them. And if someone is listening to this conversation and they pay keen attention to what you are saying, I think you have given a lot of content about how they can incorporate this into their sales process or even on their social media and website, and they can learn a lot from this interview as well. Now, as we are moving towards the last segment of this interview, I want to discuss the challenges that Fortified is having as an organization. And speaking of the organization, you already mentioned that every company has an ideal customer base. So obviously you cannot work as an organization with every roofing company as well, because you have your own customer base too. So let me just ask this: what is the type of roofing company that should not apply for the Fortified program?
I think that's a really great question, and I think it goes back to, what are you in the roofing business to do? Are you in the roofing business to provide a valuable service and pay attention to details, and really be a contractor that takes care of the consumer's best interest? If you are, I want you to be a part of the Fortified Roofing program. There are in every trade, there are folks that their primary focus is on delivering the lowest cost option, and there's a segment of the market where that's the appropriate thing to do. We want Fortified to be as efficient and cost effective as possible. That's why we try not to add anything more than we absolutely need to. And we don't have exotic solutions to things. You're using standard products that are available. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to be deeply committed to providing high value, high performance roofing systems to their customers. Those are the people that are the leaders and the early adopters that we work with most frequently, and that we really like to bring on board and walk alongside. Eventually, as Fortified becomes more prolific, more and more roofers will be involved, and we'll see lots of different opportunities that will come along and innovations that will happen to help bring those costs down and all that kind of good stuff. But today, it really is about what kind of roofer and roofing company do you want to be? If you want to be somebody who is known for professional excellence, who is known for their attention to detail, who is known for being really on the front end of the roofing trade and where it's heading, then that's the ideal Fortified Roofing contractor.
I think that if you are actually on the way to build a great company, not a big company, because everyone can do that by hiring a bunch of sales reps and just knocking doors and getting one roof per salesman. But if you are really on to building a great company, this is a great platform to be part of. And I think in the previous segments of this interview, what we have tried to do is that we have tried to bridge the gap between Fortified and the roofing contractors. Now, there is Fortified, and on this side there are homeowners as well. So I personally think this, that if you guys can actually increase the demand in homeowners, that they want their roofing contractor to be a Fortified certified and have this certification or be part of this program, I think it will just push roofing contractors to be part of this program. So is there something that you guys are doing to build awareness for the homeowners so the demand increases on that side as well?
Yeah, so we work across the country. We work with all kinds of different stakeholders to bring additional resources and attention to Fortified. So we
Yeah.
call that building the brand.
Uh,
We are collaborating with a lots of different folks who are bringing more and more capital to bear. So either state agencies that are providing funding for roofing grants that are tied to
uh,
Fortified. We work with organizations like the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, who provides grants to help improve buildings to become fortified. We work with nonprofits like Habitat and Team Rubicon and others that serve vulnerable populations to bring visibility to the brand.
Mhm.
So we do that. We also are forming really collaborative alliances with companies like GAF to help get the word out there through their marketing channels, not just to the roofing trade, but also to consumers that are looking for information about roofing products and roofing systems. The manufacturers are leaning in on that. So, those are some of the ways that we're increasing visibility, and we've seen it work. Right now in Alabama, it is very hard to sell a home that does not have a fortified designation around it. Louisiana is getting to that point now too, and it is very challenging when you have incentives like insurance incentives or access to roof grants and tax incentives. When you have those kinds of things that are out there and customers that just paid you to put their roof on, but they can't go and access those incentives, and their roof is going to last them 10, 15 years plus, they're not going to have another opportunity for a long time to be able to tap into that without incurring a lot of expense. That can leave a bitter taste in somebody's mouth that, hey, if you had told me about this, I would have done this all day. Told me that I could get an insurance discount that would be applicable every single year, and I would have had to pay $1,000 or $1,500 up front to access that. Done that all day and twice on Saturday, but you didn't tell me about that. That could be a real drawback for a roofing company not to be aware and not to at least offer the option. So yes, we are engaged every single day. You'll see experts like me and other parts of my team out there talking. We engage. We're really thankful for this opportunity. I know we're talking to roofing contractors here, but we do this a lot with a lot of different marketing channels, reaching out to consumers. We're on social media. So we are investing in building awareness of the brand
Mhm.
alongside our roofers and evaluators and our alliance partners.
On a lighter note, you told me that every state has different requirements, and obviously, every state has different laws and insurance policies and stuff like that. What has been the most challenging state for Fortified so far?
Well, none of them had been easy, I'll tell you that.
Huh.
I think, anytime you are disrupting and you're trying to bring change, there's always challenges that come along with that. I think that the easiest places to go are places that already have really good codes and really focus on enforcement of the building codes, because the tide is already high, and so the difference in cost and the difference in what you need to do to meet a fortified requirement is smaller. But there are places that have really robust codes that think that they can't really improve, or they don't need to improve. So I think there are, and then there are other places where there's not a lot of code enforcement. There's not a lot of current code adoption, and those can be pretty big states. Now, I think there's only 17 states that have statewide building codes in the US. So it is difficult, like any industry. It is difficult to bring structure and additional requirements to a market where they're not used to that. And so, every market has some element of that we have to work on. But I will tell you this, that
Mhm.
it is an unfortunate byproduct of severe weather, is that when a community experiences severe weather, whether it's a really damaging hurricane, a tornado, a derecho, once a community has been hit and the population starts to recognize, hey, I'm at risk here. I really need to build back better. I can't build back the same way my home was just damaged. Those markets tend to be very receptive to change. And so, we don't wish for any of that, but we stand ready to help communities rebuild better. And those are usually the places where things can change more rapidly after a community has experienced a severe event. Well, for example, we'll be doing stuff in Kentucky next year
Mhm.
as a result of some tornadoes that went through and really did some significant damage in parts of Kentucky a couple years ago. That's how we want to be a part of a solution down the road.
So you are saying that the adoption rate of Fortified is directly proportional to the conditions of the weather or the severe conditions of weather in a state.
Well, I'll say it slightly differently. I don't think you're too far off base there, but I think that adoption of fortified is more closely related to the perception of risk by the homeowner. So
Mhm.
if the homeowner perceives that they are at risk and that there is something that they can do about it, then they're receptive to doing something along, along those lines, whether it's investing in a fortified roof or one of our other fortified levels, silver or gold. But if they are not necessarily connecting severe weather with
Mm.
risk and how it's going to potentially impact them financially or impact the harmony of their home. Unfortunately, we see a lot of people forced out of their homes after disasters. If they're not connecting severe weather with those kinds of things and they don't think that there's a solution for them, then it's a little bit tougher. But that's one thing too that I think roofers can be a really effective way of communicating to homeowners. Homeowners may think that there's not a lot they can do to prepare for severe weather, when in fact, making a small investment in their roof can have a huge impact on whether or not their home performs better the next time. And they just don't know it because it's a technical trade. So they trust their roofer to be a good guide for them on what can I do differently. And that's where the roofer has a really great opportunity to just share that knowledge and say, hey, here's some information for you. Do you want to make a different decision than putting back what you just lost? Powerful when you can do that.
And you are right about that, because I feel that people don't need salesmen. They need guides, and they need people who can guide them towards the best solution, and not just guide them to make the sale, but actually guide them towards the best solution. And I just have two more questions for you, Fred. And the first one of that is that, let's just say you are an outsider and you are not part of Fortified, and you have to make some changes in the company or the organization right now as an outsider. What are the things that you feel can be changed or improved in the organization if you are an outsider, or if you are looking at the company as an outsider?
My biggest advice to people would be process and consistency are really, really important. Being able to have well-defined processes, to use
Mhm.
things like checklists, and to communicate really well. Making sure that those things are a part of your organization. And then, like any organization, this goes for us here at IBHS and Fortified as well, is accountability. You want to make sure that the people in your organization feel connected to what you're trying to deliver, the level of service that you're trying to deliver, and you want to be accountable for it. And how does that look? Well, that looks like, hey, we're going to make sure that all of our salespeople and all of our field folks go through this training, because we want there to be a consistent level of knowledge across the board, and we want people to be able to say, I sold it this way, we're going to install it this way, and everybody knows what that means. Consistency, communication, accountability, those are really important things. Even small things like, well, I guess it's not really that small, but getting into the habit of documenting your roof. So there's so much in the way of technology these days. Apps and services like Company Cam, and there's a whole bunch of others that are out there these days that make it easier for you to track how your work is being done, so that you can be on the cutting edge of protecting your brand. You mentioned something in your last statement that I think was, about a guide, the importance of being perceived as a guide. Customer referrals are like gold. It's the most effective advertisement you can get, is having a customer talk positively about you. Also, one of the hardest things is when you have a customer out there that's not talking so bad about, or not
Yes.
great about you. And folks that are unhappy are like 3 times as likely to talk about your service than folks that are happy with your service. And so it's really important to be committed to really good performance and really solid experience for the buyer, so that they will tell their friends that, hey, the roof's a hard thing to deal with. I may not like talking to roofers in my day-to-day life if I'm a normal homeowner.
Mhm.
And when you get a vote of confidence saying, hey, this is a really good company, they took care of me, they showed me all kinds of options, I made a decision, and they followed through, that's gold, man. And so I think those are the things if you are going to be a fortified roofer, those are the kinds of things you have to be committed to.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And I would like to add something to this statement that you made, that I read somewhere that if someone has a good experience with the other person, he or she is likely to share that experience with at least 11 other people. They tell about it. Humans tell about their good experiences to 11 people. And if someone has a bad experience, they would tell to more than 20 people about that bad experience. We talk more about our bad experiences, And regarding this interview, I really thank you for all the insights and all the information that you have shared so far with me, Fred. I only have one last question for you. Just a few moments back, you mentioned about that it's not easy to be a producer of change, and I agree with you on that. And you also, I can assume this, that when you are making this change or when you are creating this environment, you have so many experiences that make it worth it for you and your company. So, what is the experience that is most close to you that you had and that made you proud of what you are doing with Fortified?
At this point, having served 92,000 homeowners and been on the ground after, a number of different hurricanes and the like, and having my own personal experiences. I mean, I live in a fortified home. I live in coastal Florida. We've had a couple of hurricanes here. For me, knowing that we are motivated by having homeowners have better outcomes on real bad days. That's the primary reason we exist, is driving down avoidable financial loss and disruption as a result of severe weather. Knowing that we are actually delivering that keeps me going. I have been on the ground. Sally's a really good example. Also, Hurricane Ida. I was in Louisiana right before Hurricane Ida, and then talked to folks right after Hurricane Ida. And hearing homeowners that were back to normal in hours and days versus weeks, months, or even years. And we had a homeowner up in the panhandle of Florida, and category 4 hurricane goes ripping through there. All of his neighbors were forced out. He had to evacuate because of an evacuation order, but it's the moment that evacuation order was lifted, he went back home and was able to restart living within hours of that, in his home, within hours of that evacuation order being lifted. When we went back and talked to him a year later, his neighbors on either side still had not returned. And so knowing that we had that kind of impact and ability to help somebody get back to normal faster, there's very few things that are as rewarding as that. So that's what keeps me after it, is I know we can make a difference in the world, and we can help contractors be better and deliver better services, and we can help homeowners and business owners thrive after disaster and not just survive.
And I wish you the best in the mission. And I think all of you are doing something, you are building something great, and you will make it. And all of this positivity that you are creating for the homeowners and for the industry, it will reward you and Fortified and the industry overall. So my best wishes are always there for you. Thank you so much for your time, Fred. And one thing that I really enjoyed with you is that you were so composed and to the point in your answers. That is something that I really enjoy with my guests. So thanks for your time once again. And just as we are about to sign off, is there any signing off notes or advice that you have for the roofing industry?
Well, I think I want to say thank you to you for the opportunity too. I enjoyed your questions, and thanks for this format. Allows us to go into a lot of detail that short interviews don't necessarily allow us to do. So thank you for the opportunity. And the only thing I would say is hey, take advantage of what we are offering you for free. Come to the website at fortifiedhome.org, see what it's all about, and then investigate becoming certified, because it's really a good opportunity for you to grow the reputation of your business and to be considered a first-rate roofing contractor. And I think it's not a lot of to ask for to visit the website and check it out. You get a lot of return for that investment of time. So thank you again for your attention, and just do good work.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time, Fred, once again. And happy Thanksgiving in advance to you and
Thanks,
your
you too.
family. Have a great day. And it was a pleasure hosting you. I wish you the best. Just keep doing what you are doing and stay blessed. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye. Bye. Take care.